Do you believe that a single, careless sentence can change someone's entire life? At a lavish party in the heart of Seattle, he told everyone, "She doesn't have a job. Don't worry, I'll take care of her after we get married." Laughter filled the room, only she stayed silent. The next morning, he and his friends received termination letters. And when they walked into the HR office, the woman sitting in the president's chair was his fiancée, the one he thought needed saving. Oh, this is the story of a woman who chose silence to teach the world about her strength, and a man who had to lose everything to see the true worth of others finally. A 10-part journey where love is no longer charity, but understanding. A story of power, pride, and how two lost souls find their way back to each other beneath Seattle's rain. If you've ever loved, truly loved, this story is for you. That day, Seattle carried its familiar scent of rain, thin as silk, not freezing, but just enough to make the city look like it was breathing inside a dream. Raindrops slid down glass windows, reflecting the warm yellow lights from small shops along the street near Elliott Bay. And in that misty scene, the Elliott Bay Gallery glowed like a block of amber crystal against the grey sky. Ava Klene stood still before an abstract painting, red spilling into blue like an explosion frozen in time. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes calm but curious, the kind of gaze that belongs to someone who's seen too many masks in the world and now only cares for the fragments that are real. She wore a cream sweater, simple jeans, her brown hair falling loosely. No jewelry, no trace of expensive perfume. Nothing about her hinted that she owned one of the largest corporations in the Pacific Northwest. Ava had come alone, as she often did. While others fought to be seen, she preferred to disappear. "What do you see in that one?" A man's voice came from behind her, soft, genuinely curious. Ava turned around. He was tall, his hair slightly messy as if he'd just stepped out of the office after a long day. Light blue shirt, a glass of red wine still in hand. His eyes were bright, alive, the kind that belonged to someone always trying to prove he understood, that he was enough to be respected. "I see someone trying," Ava said quietly, as if speaking to herself. "Trying?" He frowned. "Trying to make order out of chaos, trying to find meaning in something that has none." He laughed. "That's deeper than the artist's own description." Ava smiled faintly. Maybe because sometimes the viewer understands art better than the creator. "I'm Ethan," he said, offering his hand, casual, confident, but not arrogant. "Ava." She shook it, her grip firm, neither soft nor cold, steady. Ethan noticed that. Ava. Peaceful name. Only if you don't know what it really means. They both turned back to the painting. Around them, the murmur of half-true, half-fake conversations filled the room. Yet the two strangers stood there sharing a quiet that felt almost sacred, and in that silence, something shifted like two orbits brushing past each other for the first time. "Do you come to places like this often?" Ethan asked. "Sometimes. I like watching people express what they can't say out loud. I usually see it as showing off." Ava tilted her head. "Maybe. But even in showing off, there's something real in how people want to be seen." Ethan smiled. "Sounds like you can read people, only when they stop trying to hide." He couldn't take his eyes off her. She wasn't beautiful in the obvious way, but there was something about her that made you stop, maybe that quietness, that peace she carried without effort. In a world where everyone talked too much, Ava said little, and that made her unforgettable. They moved on from the painting, strolling through the hall, past colors that meant nothing, yet made people believe they felt something grand. Ethan told small stories about work, deadlines, the endless busyness people called adult life. Ava only smiled softly, listening with her eyes. When they stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The air was cool and damp, carrying the smell of coffee from a shop across the street. Streetlights shimmered on the wet pavement. Ethan glanced around, then asked, "Are you walking home?" "Yes. I like listening to the city when it's tired. Can I walk with you? Just a few blocks." Ava smiled. "If you're not afraid of silence." They walked side by side, saying little, only the sound of shoes on wet ground, the wind, a distant car. Ethan realized that for the first time in years, he didn't feel the need to fill the quiet. And Ava, she felt safe in it, strangely safe. I feel like I've been waiting for this conversation for a long time, Ethan said softly when they stopped under a streetlight. Ava looked at him, her smile tinged with sadness. Maybe you weren't waiting for the conversation, but for someone to have it with. And I think that someone is you. Maybe. Yes. Her answer was light as breath, but it made his heart skip. Before turning onto the street leading to her small apartment, Ava said, "If you still want to talk tomorrow, Maple Street Cafe, 8 a.m. Deal. I'll be there. Don't be late. I never am not for what matters." She smiled and walked away. Ethan stood watching as her figure slowly dissolved into the mist, something inside him both waking and dreaming at once. The next morning, Seattle was soft and wet, like an old jazz tune. Maple Street Cafe sat beneath a canopy of red maple leaves, vintage style, wooden tables, the scent of pastries in the air. Ethan arrived early, sitting by the window, stirring his coffee without drinking. Ava arrived exactly at 8. The drizzle had left tiny drops in her hair. She wore a grey coat, a light scarf, no makeup, yet the room seemed brighter when she walked in. "You're early," she said. "I wouldn't dare let you wait." Sounds like the opening line of a love song. Maybe if you stay long enough to hear the chorus. Ava smiled, sitting down. Between them, steam rose from 2 cups of coffee, a thin veil between 2 worlds. Ethan talked a lot. About his job as a project manager in a construction firm, how he always had to prove himself, climb higher to feel worthy. He spoke of his parents, humble people who worked their whole lives so their son could do better. His voice carried pride, but also fatigue. Ava listened, really listened. Her eyes held genuine empathy, but also understanding. She knew men like him, men burdened by the need to be enough. They loved deeply, but often lost themselves in that need. "Have you ever thought," she asked gently, "what you'd do if one day you didn't have to prove anything anymore?" Ethan chuckled, embarrassed. "Never really. I think I'd be afraid I wouldn't know who I am without the goal." Maybe that's when you'd finally start being yourself." Her words were soft, but they silenced him for a long moment. "And you, Ava, what do you do?" It was a simple question, one she'd heard too many times. She smiled faintly. "I'm still figuring that out." "Really?" "Yes. Some people know exactly what they want. I don't. I just know I want to do something that makes the world a little better, or at least helps someone feel seen." Ethan nodded. "That's a beautiful way to live." Beautiful, but not easy." They both chuckled. The air between them lightened. "I feel like talking to you makes me think more than I'm used to," Ethan said. "Maybe because you're used to talking to be heard, not to understand." "And you want me to learn to listen?" "No, I just want you not to fear silence." Outside, the rain had stopped. Pale sunlight broke through the clouds. Ethan paid the bill before she could reach for her wallet. "Next time, my turn," she said. "Sure. If there's a next time, there will be. Not because you want it, but because I do too." They stepped outside. The street shimmered silver. They walked side by side, close enough that their hands could touch if one of them dared. At the corner, Ethan stopped. "Ava, I don't know who you are, but I know you're different. Different good or different bad. Different real." Her eyes softened. "Real is rare. Don't lose it." "Wali too." They parted at the intersection. As sunlight gently broke through the clouds, Ethan turned to look back. She was already walking away, her figure blending into the city, and he stood there, feeling both lost and found. That evening, Ava sat by her apartment window in Capitol Hill. Below, streetlights flickered in puddles like unnamed memories. She held her phone, opening a message from Ethan. "Thank you for this morning. I think, for the first time, a conversation actually changed me." Ava replied, "Thank you for asking the questions that matter, instead of saying the things that don't." She set her phone down, closing her eyes. There was a quiet joy inside her, and a trace of fear. She had once sworn never to let anyone step too far into her world. But Ethan Cole, with his clear eyes and honest smile, was gently opening that door, so softly she hadn't even noticed. Outside, Seattle rained again. Drops fell steady on rooftops, on the lake, on her window, like a silent promise between two souls. a promise that would lead them to love, to loss, and to the most profound awakening of the heart. Some relationships begin with grand gestures, fancy dinners, carefully chosen words, rehearsed smiles. But the love between Ava and Ethan wasn't like that. It started from the most minor things: a steaming cup of coffee on a rainy morning, a short call without a reason, a glance that lingered a second too long. After that first meeting at Maple Street Cafe, they started seeing each other more often. No plans, no formality. Just mornings when Ethan, passing by Capitol Hill, would text, "Coffee?" And a few minutes later, Ava would reply, "The usual place." Seattle was slipping into late autumn. The wind turned cold, red maple leaves burned like fire along the sidewalks, and the waters of Elliott Bay darkened, reflecting the heavy, wistful sky. The whole city seemed half awake, half dreaming, as if trying to forget something. Maybe they were, too. Ethan always arrived first, choosing the table by the window. Ava always arrived just on time, never early, never late, never enough to make him wait long, yet never predictable. She'd walk in, unwind her scarf, smile when she saw him. "You always pick the right table. The one with the best light. You said that once. You remember well." "I only remember what's worth remembering." Ava smiled, nodding lightly, and ordered her usual latte, just bitter enough to wake her up, but sweet at the end. Ethan, as always, ordered an Americano, bold, clear, decisive, like the way he saw the world. They talked about everything: a new movie, a strange headline, the little things no one else noticed. But amid those easy conversations, Ava had a way of asking questions that made people stop and think. "Are you happy?" she asked one morning as the rain tapped gently on the awning. Ethan paused. "Do you ask everyone that?" "No, just the ones pretending they're fine." He fell silent for a moment, eyes drifting to the window. His voice softened. "I think I am, but sometimes I wonder if it's real happiness or just me refusing to admit I'm tired." Ava nodded. "That's still a way to live as long as you know it's an act." He laughed, half embarrassed, half amazed. No one had ever spoken to him like that, honest, direct, but never judging. "And you?" he asked. "Are you happy?" Ava stirred her coffee. "I'm at peace, but peace doesn't always mean happiness." "What's the difference?" "Peace is when I don't hurt. Happiness is when life feels worth it. Sometimes people settle for peace because they're afraid to lose it while chasing happiness." "Oh." Her words echoed in his head the rest of the day, because he realized that was him. A stable job, a safe routine, a polished image. But somewhere along the way, he'd lost the feeling of truly being alive. The more he saw Ava, the more real everything became. She made him realize that not everything could be measured by goals or bonuses. Some things only revealed their worth when you admitted you weren't perfect. One afternoon, sitting on a wooden bench at Gasworks Park, Ethan told her about his father. "He was a mechanic, never left Washington his whole life. But he taught me this: a good man is someone others can rely on. I've always remembered that." Ava tilted her head. "And you think trust comes from protecting others?" "Yeah, I guess so. Or maybe from being brave enough to show your weakness and still trust that they won't leave." Ethan didn't answer. He'd never thought about it that way. Ava continued softly, "I think the strongest man is the one who lets people see his vulnerable side and doesn't rush to hide it." That line one day would become a prophecy for everything that was to come. As the last rays of sunlight spilled across the lake, Ethan asked, "If you could live one day as someone else, who would you be?" Ava smiled. "Someone ordinary, invisible, no one asking who I am or where I'm from." "And why?" "Because then I could love without anyone loving me for the wrong reason." Ethan didn't fully understand, but his chest tightened. He wanted to say something, but she stood, wrapped her scarf, and said, "You should go. It's going to rain hard tonight." "What about you?" "I'm always fine in the rain." She walked away, her slim figure melting into the watery horizon. Ethan watched, feeling for the first time afraid to lose someone he never truly had. Their love, if you could call it that, didn't grow through confessions or passion-filled nights. It grew in the quiet in the mornings where words were few, and in the moments when their eyes met long enough to see the exhaustion both tried to hide. One Saturday morning, Ethan arrived early with a bouquet of wild daisies. He didn't know why he chose them, maybe because they reminded him of Ava, simple, unassuming, yet impossible to ignore. When Ava saw the flowers, she smiled. "Do you give flowers to everyone who has deep conversations with you?" "No. Just to the ones who make me feel life isn't that bad after all." "Should I feel flattered?" "No. You should feel guilty for making me addicted to peace." Ava went quiet. Peace. The very thing she'd fought to keep, now it terrified her. Because once your heart finds peace in someone, reason stops working. They walked after coffee. That morning, Seattle was rare in sunlight. Faint light spread over the wet streets as puddles slowly dried. Ava told him about the cities she'd visited, never in detail, just enough to paint a picture of someone who'd seen much, lived much, and was still hiding something. Ethan spoke about work meetings, numbers, ambitious co-workers. His tone was lively, but sometimes his eyes drifted away. Ava noticed. "Do you ever feel like your job is swallowing you?" she asked. "Yeah. But isn't that just life?" "No. Not everyone lets it happen." Ethan chuckled. "You talk like you've seen the whole world." "I haven't. But I've seen too many people lose the most precious thing because they forgot to ask, 'Who am I doing this for?' I'm doing it for my family, so they'll be proud. And are you proud of yourself?" That question stilled him. He looked at her, and in that moment, he realized Ava didn't just listen. She saw him quietly, but completely. After that day, Ethan invited her to dinner. Ava Klene. "I prefer daylight. Night makes people say things they're not ready to mean." Still, she couldn't escape what was growing inside her. That night, she opened her laptop, unread company reports, restructuring plans. She closed it and stared out the window, where the city lights shimmered in the rain. Would he still love me if he knew who I really am? She didn't have an answer. One evening, Ethan called. "I'm outside the cafe. Don't know why, I just wanted to hear your voice." "Something wrong?" "No, I just feel like the day's too long, and I'm supposed to make it shorter?" "Just by talking." Ava hesitated, then began speaking small things, simple things. The rain, the smell of pastries, the old lamp she'd just replaced. Ethan listened, silent. When she stopped, he exhaled softly. "You know, you don't talk much, but you make people see a lot." Ava laughed, but inside, she felt a chill. She was afraid he might be seeing through the walls she'd built. That night, she wrote in her journal, "He has eyes too honest to be safe. I'm afraid that one day, he'll look through me and see what I'm not ready to show." Outside, the rain began again. She closed her eyes, picturing Ethan's voice asking, "Coffee?" Warm, gentle, without promises. And she knew she was moving closer to him, drip by drip, breath by breath. But somewhere deep down, a voice whispered, "Don't forget, Ava, he still doesn't know who you are." And that truth sooner or later would have to come to light. There are stages in love when people mistake peace for rightness. Ethan believed everything was perfect. Ava still came to their morning coffees, still smiled at his stories, let her small hand rest in his as they crossed the rain-drenched streets of Seattle. He trusted that quietness believed he was doing well in his role as the man. Time passed. Winter arrived. Seattle turned white under a thick veil of fog. Pine trees along the streets drooped with moisture. Ethan and Ava began seeing each other more often, not just in cafes anymore, but on walks around Green Lake or quiet dinners in her small apartment, where candlelight and old jazz made everything soft, warm, and dangerously tender. One evening, with snow falling lightly outside her window, Ethan set his glass of wine down and looked at Ava with eyes both steady and trembling. "Ava, I feel like we're not strangers anymore." She smiled, tilting her head. "Because you've seen me enough, or because you think you understand me?" "Both. But I want to understand more. I want to know who you really are." Ava was silent. Sinatra's "Fly Me to the Moon" floated gently in the background. She said softly, "If I tell you, will you still want to stay?" Ethan held her gaze. "If you're afraid, I want to be the one who makes you feel safe." Well, that line made Ava both moved and sad, because she knew not every fear needed saving. Some existed to protect truths that weren't ready to be seen. They didn't speak further. Ethan simply held her hand, and in that touch, Ava felt genuine tenderness, but underneath, a quiet pride. The pride of a man who believed he was protecting someone. The following week, Ethan made plans. He told his best friend Derek at work that he was going to propose. Derek laughed and clapped him on the shoulder. "You did it, man. Finally found someone who makes you want to stop running. Not stop, start. Really start." "And what does she do?" Ethan hesitated. "She doesn't have anything stable yet, but she's smart, thoughtful, and I don't care about that." Derek whistled. "The woman who made Ethan Cole say he doesn't care about careers? Impressive." Ethan smiled. "For the first time, I just want to protect someone, not compete with them." Well, he meant it with all his heart. He didn't know that just weeks later, that very thought, wanting to protect her, would cost him the woman he loved. The day of the proposal came. He chose Green Lake Park, where they'd once talked about peace and happiness. The air was cold, but the sun was out. Dry leaves rustled under their feet. Ethan wore a long coat, hand gripping the small ring box in his pocket. Ava thought it was just another walk. When they reached the edge of the lake, where the water mirrored the pale sky, Ethan stopped. She looked at him, puzzled. "Why are we stopping?" "Because this is where I realized I want to keep you." Before she could respond, he dropped to one knee. The world went still. He opened the box, a simple silver ring with a pale blue stone. Not expensive, but bright in the sunlight. "Ava Klene," he said, voice shaking but sure. "I don't know what you've been through, but I know I want to walk beside you from now on. I want to take care of you, be the one you can lean on. Will you marry me?" Ava stood frozen. Her heart beat fast, but not purely from joy. There was sweetness in his words, but beneath that sweetness, a quiet misunderstanding. "I want to take care of you." Beautiful as it sounded, it made her feel small, as if this love was being built on a gentle kind of pity. She bit her lip, then whispered, "You don't have to take care of me, Ethan. I know, but I want to." "Because you love me, or because you think I need saving?" He faltered just for a second, then smiled, holding her hand. "Both." Ava looked at him. In that instant, she knew. He truly loved her but didn't yet see her. He loved the soft woman before him, unaware of the world she carried inside. She drew a deep breath, then nodded. "Yes, I will." Ethan lifted her off the ground, laughing in the cold wind, and Ava tears slipped down her cheeks, though she didn't know if they were from joy or the ache of what she sensed was coming. That night, he cooked dinner, poured wine, looked at her with the eyes of a man confident he'd just made the best decision of his life. Ava smiled back, matching his joy, though something hollow opened quietly inside her. When he walked her home, they kissed under the soft yellow glow of an old streetlight. It was beautiful, the kind of moment that makes you believe nothing could ever go wrong. But after he left, Ava stared at the ring on her finger, the blue stone reflecting her face at her, and she barely recognized herself. She called her mother Mrs. Klene in New York. "I said yes," Ava told her. Her mother's voice was calm but sharp. "Good. But did you tell him who you are?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I'm afraid that once he knows, he'll love me differently." "And you think by hiding it, he's loving you rightly?" Ava said nothing. Her mother's tone softened. "You can hide the truth, Ava, but you can't hide the way someone looks at you. If one day he looks at you and you see pity instead of respect, leave before you lose yourself." Ava hung up, sat still for a long time. She slipped off the ring and placed it on the table, staring at it in silence. Outside, Seattle began to rain again. News of the engagement spread quickly through Ethan's friends. Everyone congratulated him, saying he'd found the perfect girl. Derek and Troy planned a small celebration at Lakeview Grand Hotel, overlooking the bay. Ethan was thrilled. He wanted people to see that he'd chosen love over ambition. He told Ava it would be small, intimate. Ava smiled and agreed. That evening, she wore a simple white dress, a small flower pinned in her hair. No jewelry, just the ring. Ethan's eyes lit up when he saw her. "You look beautiful." "Thank you. You too." I want tonight to be the start of forever, Ava replied softly. Sometimes beginnings and endings are only one sentence apart, Ethan. He laughed, thinking she was teasing. The crowd was larger than she'd expected. Music played, wine flowed, laughter filled the air. Everyone wanted to hear the sweet love story of Ethan Cole and the mysterious woman. One guest asked jokingly, "Ava, what did you do before meeting Ethan?" She smiled. "Many things, but none that matter tonight." "Oh, modest too." They laughed. Ethan joined in, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, and said, "She hasn't found a job yet, but it's fine, I'll take care of her. Someone has to, right?" It slipped out like a joke, but the laughter around the table roared. Ava froze. She looked into her glass, her reflection warped by the light. She didn't blame him, but something inside her shattered quietly, like glass under pressure. She smiled anyway, a small, calm smile, but the light in her eyes dimmed. Ethan didn't notice. He was too busy talking about their future, the house they'd have, the wife he'd take care of. When the night wore on, and the guests began to drift, Ava stepped out onto the balcony. Seattle glittered below, silent and wet. Derek joined her, handing her a glass of wine. "You know," he said, "Ethan's never been this happy. You've done something no one else could." Ava's voice was soft, eyes on the city lights. "Maybe, but his happiness might be built on an illusion." "What illusion?" "That he's helping me." Derek laughed, not really understanding. Ava only smiled, turned, and went back inside. She pulled out her wallet, took out a black credit card engraved with her name, Ava Klene. She handed it to the hotel manager. "Please cover everything tonight. Drinks, flowers, music." The manager glanced at the card, startled, then nodded. Ava looked back once more. Ethan was laughing among his friends, face glowing with pure joy. She knew she loved that man, but also knew love couldn't last when only one of them saw the truth. She texted him, "I'm heading home. Thank you for tonight. And please don't tell anyone you'll take care of me. Let them believe I can take care of myself." She set her phone down and left the hotel. Rain had started again, soft, silver, endless. Ava walked alone along the long, wet street, her white dress clinging to her legs, shoes soaking through. At the bridge, she took off the ring, holding it in her palm. The pale blue stone caught the streetlight like Ethan's gaze. Honest, but not yet deep enough. She threw it into the water. A faint splash, then silence. She exhaled, whispering, "I love you, Ethan, but I need to be seen, not saved." And that night, their most beautiful love began to dissolve quietly in the rain. That night, Seattle glittered brighter than usual. The lights from the Lakeview Grand Hotel spilled onto the bay, stretching in long golden ribbons across the water. Inside the ballroom, violins played softly, glasses clinked, laughter rippled through the air, a perfect symphony of joy, or perhaps of well-dressed pretenses wrapped in wine and light. Ethan stood in the center of it all, adjusting his tie, his excitement so radiant that even the young waiter nearby smiled along. Tonight was his engagement party, a new beginning, as he called it. He was proud to introduce Ava to everyone, not realizing that pride was slowly morphing into something else, self-importance. Ava arrived last. She wore an ivory dress that hugged her figure, lightly understated, but enough to make heads turn. Her hair fell loose, her eyes soft yet distant. Ethan spotted her across the room and immediately made his way to her, smiling wide. "You're here," he said, taking her hand. "I was afraid you'd change your mind." Ava smiled faintly. "Change my mind? No, I was just late. The rain slows everything down. I won't let rain slow us down." He meant it as something romantic, but to Ava, it sounded like control, as if he wanted to set the pace for both of them. She didn't argue, just nodded slightly. The party began. Handshakes, polite laughter, toasts. Ethan's friends, Derek, Troy, and Cameron, were the first to arrive, already half-lit with champagne. "Ava, what did you do to make this guy behave so well?" Troy joked. She smiled. "Maybe because I didn't try." "Careful," Derek added. "He likes mysterious women. Get too predictable and he'll panic." Ethan laughed, trying to keep the tone light. Come on, don't tease her. Then, casually, she doesn't have to worry about anything. I'll take care of both of us. The words came out naturally, but Ava felt the entire world pause for half a second. Then came the laughter, loud, harmless, oblivious. You're such an old-fashioned man, Cameron said, raising his glass. Treating your wife like one of your projects. Ethan grinned, clinking glasses. Well, she could use a little direction. Ava stayed silent, swirling the wine in her glass. Her face calm, her eyes far away. She wasn't angry, just cold. Through the hum of violins, the sentence replayed in her mind. I'll take care of her. It sounded like a promise, but felt more like ownership than love. Moments later, Ethan led her to the center of the hall. Everyone, he said with a proud smile, raising his glass. I just want to say a few words. His voice was confident, full of sincerity. Today's a special day. I'm not great with emotions, but I know I'm lucky. I found someone incredible, gentle, smart, and, even though she doesn't have a stable job yet, hasn't found her direction, I'll always be here to take care of her, because that's what a man should do. Laughter, applause, cheers of, that's right. Ava smiled gracefully, beautifully, but inside, something cracked. She didn't blame him. Ethan didn't mean harm. He was just living the belief he'd been taught that love meant protecting. But true love isn't protection. True love is seeing each other completely, equally, where no one has to shrink for the other to stand tall. Ava quietly excused herself and stepped into the corridor. The cold air hit her face, sharp and freeing. From there, she could see the golden reflection of the city lights over the bay, everything dazzling, painfully beautiful. Ethan followed a moment later. You okay? I'm fine, just needed some air. I'm sorry if what I said embarrassed you. Ava turned to him, smiling softly. You don't have to apologize. You only said what you believe. I just want you to know I'll never let you go without anything you need. Except respect. Ethan froze. Ava's voice stayed calm, almost tender. Don't promise to take care of me, Ethan. Let me take care of myself. Then if I still choose you, that's love. She walked away, leaving him standing there as the band inside began playing Can't Help Falling in Love. And for the first time that night, Ethan felt something slipping from his grasp, though he couldn't name what it was. The party ended late. Ethan stayed behind, chatting with friends. Everyone praised him. Lucky man. Good guy. Solid choice. Then, meanwhile, at the front desk, Ava handed the clerk a black credit card. Please settle the entire bill, she said softly. The ballroom, the wine, everything. The clerk glanced at the name Ava Klene, then looked up, startled. She gave a polite nod. Thank you, Miss Klene. You're welcome. Ava left the hotel quietly. Outside, the rain had returned Seattle's signature drizzle, soft and endless, as if rewriting words someone hadn't dared to say. Her shoes soaked, her dress clinging to her legs, she walked through the damp streets, each step heavier with unsaid truths. Meanwhile, in a nearby bar, Ethan's friends laughed over whiskey. See, Derek said, she's the kind of woman every guy wants. Sweet, quiet, beautiful. Yeah, Troy added. Maybe a bit too quiet, but that's his type. Ethan smiled faintly. You don't get her. Ava's different. Different how? She just is. He didn't elaborate. Something in him felt uneasy, though he didn't know why. That night, when he finally got home, there was a message waiting. I went home early. Sleep well, Ethan. Short, polite. Unlike her usual tone, he called no answer. Ava was standing by her apartment window, watching the city blur through streaks of rain. Seattle, the city of people always trying to be someone. She smiled, a small, cruel kind of sadness. She took a photo of the ring on her table, then switched off her phone, removed her earrings, slipped off her dress, put on a coat, whispered to herself, "It's enough." The next morning, Ethan woke to find the ring box empty on his nightstand. A new message glowed on his phone. Don't look for me. Last night, I saw enough to know I can't be the one protected. I need to be seen, Ethan. When you can see me, truly see me, come back. He sat in silence. Outside, rain fell steadily. The room smelled of wine, flowers, and something nameless emptiness. That same morning, on the 47th floor of Klene Tower, a private meeting was underway. Faces tense, papers neatly stacked. At the head of the table sat Ava, calm, composed, her eyes cold as glass. "Miss Klene," her secretary said quietly, "the personnel transfer documents are ready." "Thank you," Ava replied, her voice even. "Send them out today." At the top of the list were 4 names: Ethan Cole, Derek Lang, Troy Williams, Cameron Reed. Ava signed. The ink spread clean and dark. Then she set the pen down, leaned back, and exhaled. A single tear fell, not from anger, but from sorrow. Because sometimes we don't leave out of hate. We leave so the one we love can finally learn what truly matters. That morning, Seattle was so cold the mist hadn't yet lifted. Grey light fell through the office window, spilling over the cluttered desk in front of Ethan. He hadn't slept all night. He'd sat there, staring at the empty ring box, trying to understand why Ava had left, but the more he thought, the less he saw. All that remained was one feeling, that he'd lost something he never really knew how to keep. The sharp trill of his phone cut through the silence. Ethan startled. An email notification flashed on the screen. Notice of termination, effective immediately. He blinked, thinking he'd misread. Then another message arrived from Derek. "Did you get the email?" "All of us did." "What the hell is going on?" Ethan opened the notice again. The black letters were short and cold. "Under the restructuring decision of Klene Industries, the following positions will be terminated, effective immediately." His name was at the top. He stood abruptly, slamming the phone down. His heart pounded. Impossible. He'd just led the company's most successful project that quarter. He'd just signed a significant contract. How could they fire him today? Before he could think, Derek's name appeared on the caller ID. "Ethan, I'm at the office." Troy and Cameron got the same notice. "We need to talk to whoever's in charge." "Who's in charge?" "Word is, the company got bought out. No one's explaining anything. Meet me at Klene Tower, 47th floor. Now." Derek's voice was sharp, tense. Ethan threw on his coat and ran out. Seattle wasn't raining that morning, but the sky was low and colorless. Wisps of fog drifted through the streets like smoke. His hands tightened on the steering wheel, his mind on one question. Did Ava know about this? When he arrived, the others were already waiting in the lobby. Derek, Troy, Cameron, faces tight with anger and disbelief. "You won't believe this," Cameron said. "Our company's been bought out by Klene Industries." Ethan froze. "Klene?" "Yeah. And rumor is, their chairwoman herself signed off on the restructuring. All the mid-level managers are being cut. We're just collateral." They stepped into the elevator. The doors closed with a metallic ting. The numbers climbed. 21, 30, 3, 40, 2, 40, 7. Each ding sounded like a countdown. The doors slid open. The 47th floor gleamed with glass and white walls. Elegant, minimal, cold. At the end of the hall stood a tall wooden door with silver lettering, "Chairwoman's Office." A middle-aged woman in a black suit waited by the entrance. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked evenly. "We're here to speak to whoever signed the termination orders," Derek replied. "She's expecting you," the woman said. "She?" Ethan repeated. "Yes, Miss Klene." His heartbeat stuttered. No, it couldn't be. It couldn't be her. The door opened. Sunlight poured into the vast room, reflected from Elliott Bay. And there she was, Ava, sitting behind a sleek white desk, her hair pulled back, her suit immaculate, her expression calm. No longer the woman from the coffee shop, no longer the girl in the white dress by the lake. Before them stood Ava Klene, chairwoman of one of the largest corporations in the Pacific Northwest, a woman who could alter hundreds of lives with one signature. Silence filled the room. Derek's jaw dropped. Cameron's fists tightened, and Ethan, he couldn't breathe. Ava looked up, her eyes still and unreadable. "You're on time. Good. I don't like lateness." Her tone was calm, steady. Ethan took a step forward, his voice shaky. "Ava, what is this?" Her lips curved slightly. "Mr. Cole, in the workplace. It's Miss Klene." "Ava, I..." I don't recall giving you permission to address me that way during business hours. He froze. She stood, walked toward them slow, composed, every step deliberate. I know you're surprised, she said, but this isn't personal. I'm doing my job. During our internal audit, your team was found to have violated company conduct and ethics policies. Derek snapped. That's ridiculous. Ava raised a hand, silencing him. I have evidence. All three of you used company resources for personal benefit. And you, Ethan Cole, signed off on it. I'm not punishing you. I'm removing you. The room went dead quiet. Only the sound of wind brushed against the windows. Ava stopped in front of Ethan, meeting his eyes. You want the real reason, don't you? He nodded, barely. Because I can't let a man who thinks he has the right to take care of me keep running any project under my company. Her voice wasn't harsh, just honest. Ethan's world tilted. You're the chairwoman. You've been hiding this the whole time. You never asked, she said softly. You only assumed. Why? Because I needed to know if I had nothing, no money, no power, would you still love me? She drew a breath. Now I know. The room felt like a tomb. Ethan looked at her, the woman he thought was fragile now standing before him, so strong it made him afraid to step closer. He wanted to speak, to apologize, but his throat locked. Ava turned, signed a document, and said without looking up, Security will escort you out. The termination is effective immediately. Good luck. She sat down again, her eyes fixed on her papers. Ethan lingered a moment longer, then stepped back. Derek touched his arm. Let's go. The door closed behind them with a soft click. Ava stayed seated. The echo of footsteps faded. Then she opened her drawer and took out the silver ring, the one he'd given her. It lay in her palm, catching the light. Her reflection shone faintly in the stone, no anger now, only sorrow. You said you'd take care of me, she whispered. Now I've given you a chance to learn how to take care of yourself. The story spread like wildfire. By noon, the whole building was buzzing. Ethan Cole's fiancée was the chairwoman all along. No one believed it at first. People whispered, smirked, pitied. Ethan went home and shut the door, turned off his phone. Everything had collapsed. He sat for hours, staring out the window, Seattle buried in fog. Anger, shame, hurt, confusion, all tangled together. He felt humiliated, betrayed, yet somewhere deep down, he knew Ava hadn't done wrong. She had simply shown him a mirror. He saw himself confident to the point of blindness, loving not through understanding, but through assumption. 3 days later, a letter arrived from Klene Industries. Inside was an official notice and a handwritten note. I don't hate you. I just can't keep loving someone who still believes he's the savior. I hope one day you'll see me not through pity, but through respect. Ava. Ethan read it over and over, his eyes burning. He stepped out onto the balcony, wind slapping against his face. The city below blurred in grey light. He wondered if there had been a single moment, in all those months, when he had truly seen her, or if he'd only seen the version of her that made him feel strong. That night, he picked up his phone, typed her number, then erased it. In his mind, one sentence echoed endlessly, I'll take care of her. Once, those words had filled him with pride. Now, they weighed more than anything he'd ever carried. Across the city, in the glass-walled office of the 47th floor, Ava stood by her window. Far away, a faint golden light shimmered his apartment. Perhaps. She pressed a fingertip to the glass and whispered, I never wanted to hurt you, Ethan. But sometimes, to love truly, we have to destroy the most beautiful illusions. Then she turned off the lights and walked away. Outside, dawn was breaking cold, transparent, and mercilessly honest. It shone over everything people once tried to hide. And so, another chapter of love ended, not with tears, but with a quiet awakening. 2 days after that fateful meeting, 4 men received new letters summoning them back to Klene Tower. This time, it wasn't a termination notice, it was a formal internal hearing before legal closure. The words were dry, bureaucratic, but everyone knew what it meant. One last chance to speak or to stay silent. Ethan didn't want to go. He'd already fallen far enough. But Derek called. You should come. If not for yourself, then for her. Here? You know exactly who I mean." So he went. That morning, Seattle was clear and cold, the kind of morning where the light felt sharp enough to cut. Clean Tower loomed against the pale sky, glass gleaming like the walls of a fortress, a place where emotion had no permission to exist. The four men entered the boardroom on the 47th floor. It was vast, the glass walls looking out over Elliott Bay, blue-gray and distant. Sunlight slanted across the long table, catching on every tense face. Ava stood at the head of the room. No lawyers, no Idis. Just her alone, poised, framed by too much light. She wore a black suit. Her hair was tied back tight. The click of her heels on the marble floor sounded like a clock counting down. "Sit," she said. Her voice was soft, but enough to make them obey immediately. She looked around the table, her gaze resting briefly on each of them. "Do any of you wish to contest my decision?" Cameron spoke first. "We've worked here for nearly 10 years. You can't destroy 4 careers based on a few internal reports." Ava tilted her head slightly. "Reports?" she repeated. "Do you think I didn't read every email, every expense sheet, every adjusted contract you filed?" Her tone didn't rise yet. Each word landed like steel. "You've used company funds for private projects, taken commissions from clients. I'm not firing you. I'm removing a habit." Derek lowered his head, silent. Troy gave a strained laugh. "We were just being flexible." "Flexible?" Ava smiled faintly. "I call it dishonest." The air grew heavy. Ethan sat at the far end, eyes fixed on her. She was composed, distant, but he noticed her hand tremble slightly as she turned a page. She was hiding her feelings, just as he once did. Finally, she looked directly at him. "And you, Ethan Cole?" Her tone dropped quiet enough to draw everyone's attention. "You approved those actions. You were supposed to be responsible. Do you have anything to say?" Ethan met her gaze. The light from the windows made her seem both close and unreachable. He took a slow breath, voice rough. "Ava, I just want to know, did you do all this for the company or for me?" She paused, their eyes locked. Then she said, clearly, deliberately, "For justice, and for you." The room went utterly still. "Because you need to understand something, Ethan," she continued, stepping closer. "You never loved a real woman. You loved the idea of being needed. You loved your reflection, the hero in your own story. And you mistook that for love." Ethan's hands clenched. His voice broke. "That's not true. I love you. No," Ava said, shaking her head. "You love the feeling of saving someone. But real love doesn't rescue, Ethan. It respects." She turned back to the head of the table. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said quietly, "but I needed to wake you up. Maybe I should even thank you because of you. I've learned something too, that love, without self-awareness, can become the most dangerous form of power." Cameron slammed his palm on the table. "You're turning a personal story into corporate revenge." Ava met his stare, calm, cutting. "If it weren't for me, none of you would have a corporation to abuse." Then, in a voice steady and final, she added, "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm giving each of you a chance to start over, and that begins by leaving this place." Ethan rose from his seat. "You can take my job, my reputation, but you can't erase what I feel for you." Ava said nothing at first. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. "Ethan," she whispered, "real feeling doesn't need to be believed, only understood. And I think now, we both understand." She gestured to the guard by the door. "Go, before I lose my resolve." Ethan looked at her one last time, then turned away. Light from the glass walls stretched across his back, a long, trembling shadow. When the door closed, Ava braced herself against the table, exhaling sharply. Her hands were still shaking. She didn't regret what she'd done, but it hurt. It was the pain of someone who'd done the right thing, and whose heart still called it wrong. That afternoon, rain returned. Ava sat alone in the now empty meeting room. The sound of raindrops against glass merged with the weary breath of the city. She turned the pen in her hand, staring at a faint scratch on the table, a trace of the confrontation earlier. Diane Parker, the company's vice chair, entered quietly. "You handled it well," Diane said, "but I know that wasn't easy." Ava gave a weary smile. "I thought I was ready, but when I saw him, everything trembled again." Diane nodded. That's proof you're still human. And it's also why you're strong enough to lead. Ava gazed out the window. Below, Seattle's streets shimmered red in the rain. Do you ever think power doesn't just make us lonely, she murmured, but turns us into what we once despised? Diane replied slowly, sometimes. But if power is used to teach a truth that matters, it's worth it. Ava didn't answer. She knew Diane was right, yet her chest still felt hollow. That night, when she returned to her apartment, an envelope lay at her door. No name, just a single handwritten line. Don't erase me from your memory. Inside was a photo taken at Green Lake, the day Ethan had proposed. Both of them smiling, sunlight flashing on the water. Ava stared at it for a long time, then pressed her fingers gently over the image. You still don't understand, Ethan, she whispered. I never wanted to erase you. I just wanted you to see yourself. She opened her laptop and began typing an email to HR. Please retain the employment records of the 4 terminated employees. Ensure full severance support and connect them with non-profit partners for re-employment opportunities. She hit send, then leaned back in her chair. The light above her flickered, catching half her face, half bright, half shadowed. Across the city, Ethan sat by his desk, staring at the same letter and the severance envelope he hadn't opened. He didn't touch the money. He just looked at her signature, bold, clean, untouchable. He thought about every morning they'd spent in that little cafe, every question she'd asked that he'd brushed off as abstract philosophy. Now, every word had become a blade, carving truth out of him. He stood, looking out at Seattle, the city of illusions and hard-earned lessons. Her voice echoed in his mind. You loved the person you imagined, not the one standing in front of you. Ethan let out a tired laugh. Maybe you're right, Ava, he whispered. But one day, I'll make sure you can see the real me. Outside, the rain kept falling. The apartment was dark, except for the faint light from distant windows reflecting across the glass, landing on his face, revealing something new in his eyes. A spark. No pride, no ego, only a quiet hunger to begin again. The rain hadn't stopped. Day bled into night. Seattle that season seemed drowned in a never-ending haze, mist rolling down the sloped streets around Lake Union, soft and gray like breath that refused to fade. In a small 12th-floor apartment, Ethan sat motionless in the half-dark, the glow of his phone casting tired shadows across his hollow face. 16 days had passed since he'd been fired. 62 job applications sent. 3 interviews. 0 callbacks. The explanations were always the same. Your experience is impressive, Mr. Cole, but your record shows a termination from Clean Industries. They didn't specify why. He would give the same strained smile, answering, restructuring, a decision from upper management. Upper management. The phrase alone was enough to end every conversation. No one wanted to hire a man who'd once crossed the upper management of Clean Industries. Eventually, Ethan stopped hoping. He slept little, spoke less, ate only when he remembered. The photos of him and Ava still hung on the wall, but he couldn't bring himself to take them down. Taking them down would mean admitting that she was truly gone. Every night, he dreamed. He dreamed of Ava standing in a bright white room while he stood outside, knocking endlessly, and no one ever opened the door. Each time he woke, the rain outside sounded like her voice repeating, "You never really saw me." One afternoon, Derek showed up. The friend who had once laughed beside him at every party now looked worn out, hollow-eyed. "How can you still live here?" Derek asked, glancing around the bare apartment. Ethan shrugged. "You just live." "Oh? I heard Ava sent some kind of financial support. I didn't take it. Out of pride." Ethan met his gaze. "Because I don't want to be someone who needs saving again." Derek gave a tired chuckle. "You've changed, but it's too late." Ethan didn't argue. He knew Derek was right. The cruelest part wasn't being late, it was realizing the truth when there was no one left to witness it. After that day, Derek disappeared. So did Troy and Cameron. The group chat went silent. The apartment grew quieter. Even the hum of the fridge seemed loud. Sometimes Ethan would sit for hours just watching the rain slide down the glass. He wasn't afraid of silence anymore. Silence was the only place he could still hear himself. One morning, he woke earlier than usual. A rare sun cracked through the clouds. He stepped outside and walked along the lake with no destination in mind. People hurried to work. Buses hissed past, the world kept spinning, indifferent to the man who had lost everything. At a bus stop, a wooden notice board caught his eye. A paper sign hung crookedly, its ink smudged by moisture. Volunteers needed. Riverside Community Center. Help rebuild old housing units. A phone number scrawled in blue pen. He stared at it for a long time, at that small, uncertain doorway that might lead nowhere, but at least it wasn't a wall. Ethan dialed. A woman's voice answered, brisk, a little rough. Riverside Center. Who's this? I'm calling about the rebuilding work. The helper position? Got any construction experience? No. Community work? No. Then what do you do know? After a pause, Ethan said softly, I guess I know how to listen. Silence. Then the woman replied, listening's good enough tomorrow, 7 a.m., 10:32, 4th Avenue South. Bring gloves. Don't be late. The line went dead. Ethan stood there on the street, phone in hand, and for the first time in months he smiled. He had a reason to wake up the next morning. Riverside sat in the southern edge of the city, the part of Seattle not quite pretty, not yet desperate enough to be pitied. A converted warehouse served as headquarters, its paint peeling, sign crooked. But inside there was laughter, hammering, shouting raw, alive. Nothing about it resembled the world Ethan used to know. Valerie, the woman from the call, greeted him, 40-ish, curly hair, sharp eyes that looked exhausted but alive. So you're Ethan, no experience, right? Right. Then you start with bricks. Nobody here's too good to carry bricks. He smiled faintly. Got it. Got it. Isn't enough. One more rule. No past talk here. Everyone's got a past they'd rather not explain. And so he began. Day 1. Hauling bricks, clearing debris, mixing concrete. His palms blistered, his back screamed. But that night, under the shower, as the dirt washed off his skin, he felt something strange. Lightness. No one there knew who he used to be, the manager, the man with the glass-walled apartment, the lover of a woman powerful enough to change destinies. At Riverside, he was simply Ethan, the new guy. And for the first time, he didn't have to prove anything to anyone. The first week, he barely spoke. By the second, he started listening. There was Benjamin, a veteran who'd lost a leg and lived in a van. Jasmine, a single mother evicted for falling behind on rent. Elena, a young woman escaping an abusive marriage. Each carried real wounds, not the kind Ethan used to romanticize. They didn't want saving. They just wanted someone to hear them. So he listened. No advice, no pity, just presence. One evening, Valerie sat beside him. You know why so many end up here? She asked. Because they weren't lucky. No, she said. Because society decided they didn't deserve luck. She studied him. I see that look in your eyes. You used to believe that too, didn't you? Ethan nodded. I used to think hard work was enough. Now I know. Some people never even get the chance to start. Valerie smiled. Welcome to the real world, Ethan. From then on, he threw himself into the work. He learned carpentry, metal framing, paperwork, how to guide people through housing applications. His hands grew rougher, but his heart softer. He began keeping a journal, not to complain, but to record what he learned. One night he wrote, I used to think success meant looking up. Now I think success is being able to look down without shame. He would reread that line many times, and it would save him on the days he felt he had nothing left to hold on to. 4 months passed. Ethan lived simply shared meals, 6-day work weeks, quiet nights. No one spoke of Ava, but she lingered within him not as a lost love, but as a silent teacher. Whenever rain fell, he remembered her eyes that day, cold, resolute, and yet full of pain. He finally understood. She had chosen what was right over what was easy, and sometimes true love means letting the person you love hate you. One late afternoon, Valerie called him over. Ethan, we want you to lead the next project team. You've got a knack for it. He laughed softly. Leadership? I've tried that before. Didn't go so well. Maybe not then. But now, you don't just give orders, you listen. That's real leadership. Ethan looked out the window. Rain again, soft, familiar. But this time, it didn't feel sad. It felt peaceful. Like ash after a fire, cold, grey, but fertile ground, where something new could finally begin to grow. Late spring in Seattle. The city was still damp, but sunlight had begun slipping shyly through breaks in the clouds. At the Riverside Community Center, the first rays of morning light gleamed over rows of freshly painted homes. Hammers clanged. Children's laughter echoed from the playground. And among them Ethan. He was crouched low, hands covered in white paint, his shirt streaked with stains, a man utterly different from the one who once strode through marble halls and glass towers. No watch, no suit, no clever words meant to impress. Now, he listened for real, smiled for real, and worked until he was honestly tired. Valerie walked up beside him, holding a paper cup of steaming coffee. "Drink, hero," she teased. Ethan grinned. "I'm not a hero anymore." "Good. We don't need heroes here, just people who do their part." He nodded, taking the cup, his gaze sweeping across the site. 3 months ago, this had been a row of abandoned houses peeling paint, mold, broken glass. Now it was a living community, a library corner, a shared kitchen, a garden for those without homes. Ethan had redrawn the layout, organized volunteer shifts, rebuilt walls with his own hands. He wasn't a boss anymore, but for the first time, he felt he was building something that truly mattered. That afternoon, kids ran around him, shrieking with laughter. A little boy with brown skin tugged at his sleeve. "Mr. Ethan, look, I can write my name." "Oh." On a small chalkboard, in shaky letters, was Ben. Ethan crouched down, smiling. "Nice job, Ben. Tomorrow, I'll teach you how to write dream, okay?" "Dream?" "Yeah. It means something you hope for." The boy's eyes lit up. "My dream is to have a house." Ethan ruffled his hair. "You will." When the boy ran off, Valerie murmured beside him, "You know, he and his mom lived in a car for 3 years. Never had a real home." Ethan looked after the small figure and felt something tighten in his chest. 3 years ago, he might have walked past people like them without ever seeing them. That night, the volunteers sat together around the communal kitchen. They ate, swapped stories, laughed, sometimes fell into comfortable silence. Ethan felt closer to them than to any colleagues he'd ever had. They were imperfect, unpolished, but genuine. Valerie tapped the table. "Hey, Ethan, you ever think about staying longer?" He looked up. "What do you mean?" "The center's expanding west. I can't handle both branches. I need someone to run the new project." "You mean me?" "You've got what it takes, and I think you should do it." Ethan didn't answer right away. His mind flashed to Klene Tower, to the glass conference room, to Ava sitting bathed in sterile white light. Then to Maple Street Cafe, the beginning of everything. He said quietly, "I used to think strength came from power. Now I think it comes from doing something good, even when no one's watching." Valerie smiled. "Well, you learn fast." She poured a bit more wine into her glass. "When you see the woman who made you this way, tell her I said thanks." Ethan chuckled, softly, eyes distant. "I don't know if she'd want to see me." "Trust me," Valerie replied. "The people who change us, they always come back. If not in person, then at least in a look." June. The Riverside project was a success. A local paper ran the headline, "Former Clean Industries Manager Leads Housing Rebuild for Seattle's Homeless." The article didn't mention much about his past, just showed a photo of him smiling, holding a hammer, with the sign behind him, "Riverside, Rebuilding Together." That photo found its way to Ava. She was in her office, surrounded by files, when Diane walked in and placed the newspaper on her desk. "You might want to see this." Ava's eyes fell on the image. Ethan, hair messy, hands strong, eyes peaceful. The caption, "He works quietly, but the results speak for themselves." A warmth and a sting rose in her chest. "You know," Diane said gently, "not everyone can fall that hard and still get back up." Ava didn't speak. She just touched the edge of the photograph, light flickering across her face, half shadow, half Sunday. And in her heart, a small voice whispered, "Ethan Cole. You finally see now." That evening, Ava left the office early. She drove through rain-slick streets, the city glowing in reflection. No plan, just an instinct pulling her south. By the time she reached Riverside, night had fallen. The new homes were still lit. Children played, laughter echoing in the wet air. She stopped the car, stood in the shadows, watching, and there in the center of it all was Ethan, kneeling to tie a child's shoelace, his hands stained with paint, hair ruffled, shirt smudged, but his whole posture radiating calm. Ava stood still for a long time, unseen. She knew this moment was more beautiful than any reunion could be. Because sometimes, love isn't about being with someone, it's about seeing them at peace in the life they chose. Ethan lifted his head for a second, gaze drifting toward the gate. She stepped back into the shadow of a tree. For a heartbeat, his eyes lingered as if sensing something. Then he turned, smiling, back to his work. Ava smiled too, her cheeks wet with rain but warm inside. She whispered, "I wasn't wrong to believe in you, Ethan." Then she walked away, got in her car, and drove into the misty night. Back at the center, Valerie approached Ethan, handing him a small envelope. "A woman dropped this off for you," she said. "What woman?" "She didn't say. Just told me to tell you open it when you're alone." Ethan wiped his hands, tore the flap open. Inside was a photo, the two of them at Maple Street Cafe, sitting by the window table. On the back, a line written in delicate handwriting. "I've always believed there are two kinds of love. One that makes us feel bigger, and one that makes us feel small. You once made me feel small, but now, you make me proud." Ethan gripped the photo, his eyes stinging. He looked up toward the Seattle night where rain and streetlights blurred together like dreams with no transparent edges. Inside him was a strange, quiet ache of loss, of grace, of peace, and for the first time, he didn't need to name it. If anyone were to ask him, "What is love?" he would answer simply, "Love is seeing someone so clearly that you no longer need them to stand beside you." Seattle had changed, but the rain hadn't. Still fine, still cold, still the one thing that made everything feel real. 4 years had passed since Ava left Ethan. 4 years since that morning he stared at the empty ring box, and she sat by the window on the 47th floor, watching the city below her unravel. 4 years, enough time for wounds to heal, yet still leave scars. That morning, Ava returned to Maple Street Cafe. The little shop was still there, the scent of cinnamon, the same old jazz drifting through the speakers. The barista, the kind, gray-haired man who always brewed the coffee too strong, was still behind the counter, still smiling. She chose the same table by the window, the one where they'd once sat through countless rainy mornings, with 2 steaming cups and the kinds of questions that made hearts ache. She sat quietly, looking out. People hurried by, umbrellas open, their reflections rippling in puddles. Only she let the rain touch her hand through the half-open window. Beside her lay a folded morning paper. On the front page, Seattle Charity Summit 2024, Rebuilding Communities, Building Futures. And under, Special Guest Speaker, Ethan Cole, Director, Riverside Community Program. Ava smiled softly. Her fingertips brushed the name, tracing the letters like a memory. She didn't know whether she felt pride or fear, because sometimes, what's scarier than meeting someone again is realizing you still feel something. The doorbell above the cafe chimed. Ava looked up, and time stopped. Ethan stepped in. A long coat damp from the rain, messy hair, eyes the same deep brown, only now quieter, steadier, deeper. He wasn't the confident man who once filled rooms with his voice. He was someone who had lost, fallen, and learned to rise. They looked at each other, saying nothing. Rain whispered against the window, and the cafe's warm light mirrored in their eyes like 2 facing mirrors. No one blinked first. Ethan walked to her table. "You still sit in the same spot." Ava smiled faintly. "And you still don't carry an umbrella." "I never liked hiding from the rain. Maybe because you're afraid of not seeing your city for what it really is. Or because I might miss someone walking through it." "Zero," Ava chuckled, lowering her eyes to her cup. "Black coffee?" "As always." "You haven't changed much." "I've changed more than you think. But some things, I don't want to." Silence. Outside, tires hissed across wet pavement. The air between them was no longer tense, only calm, familiar, like two people remembering a story they no longer needed to fix. Ethan spoke first. I saw the paper this morning. The summit? Yeah. You're speaking? I am. Just representing the sponsor company. And I'm the guest speaker. I know. She smiled faintly. I saw your name before they even sent me the invitation. Ethan chuckled. Guess fate still enjoys its little jokes. Seems like it. You'll be there, won't you? Maybe. When you say maybe, that means definitely, doesn't it? Ava smiled. You still like to interpret everything. No. Now I just like to hope. They both turned to the window, watching the drizzle soften the city. Ethan's voice lowered. I used to blame you. For a long time. But I understand now if you hadn't done what you did, I might still be that arrogant man who thought love was a favor. Eva tilted her head. And now? Now I know love means standing beside someone, not above, not below. Just beside. She looked at him for a long moment. In his eyes, there was no pride, no swagger, only quiet truth. A man who had broken, and because of it, had finally learned to bow to his own humanity, and in that humility, stood taller than ever. Do you know what makes me happiest? She asked softly. What? Not that you changed because of me, but that you changed for yourself. He smiled. And you? Did you change? I did. I learned that being too strong can sometimes be just another way of hiding. Oh? They both laughed a real laugh, light and warm, like that first morning in the art gallery so long ago. That afternoon, the summit filled a grand hall downtown. Soft white lights, a jazz trio playing What a Wonderful World. Ethan stepped onto the stage, no tie, just a simple grey suit. His voice was calm, grounded, magnetic in its honesty. He spoke of rebuilt homes, of people who'd lost everything and still found reasons to try again. The most valuable thing I've learned, he said, is not how to save others, but how to help them see they never needed saving. They just needed to be seen. Silence, the kind that meant everyone was listening. In the front row, Ava sat upright, eyes locked on him. Then he said, and sometimes, to learn that, you have to lose someone who mattered more than anything. Applause rose, filling the hall. Ava's throat tightened. When he stepped down, their eyes met just for a second, but it was enough. No apologies, no debts, only understanding. Two people who had walked through their own hells and still chose to keep walking. After the event, the rain returned. Ava stepped out, umbrella forgotten. Ethan stood at the top of the stairs, hands in his pockets, watching the sky. He smiled when he saw her. Seattle still hasn't learned how to stop raining. Maybe because the rain's what keeps this city honest. Or maybe because it keeps giving people reasons to meet again. She looked up at him. Where are you going? Back to Riverside. We're breaking ground on a new housing site tomorrow. In the rain? Yeah, rain's good for cement. Ava laughed, that clear, unguarded laugh that lit up her eyes. Ethan tilted his head. Want to come? Where to? Doesn't matter, as long as it's together. The words were soft, yet in the rain, they sounded like a promise that didn't need binding. Ava looked at him for a long time, then nodded. They walked, no umbrella, letting the rain fall on their hair, their shoulders, the years that once kept them apart. People huddled under awnings, but the two of them kept walking calm, unhurried, like the most peaceful fools in the world. No holding hands, no kisses, no words, just footsteps, mingling with the rhythm of the rain and the breathing of two souls who had finally found themselves. Seattle blurred into mist, and within it, two silhouettes moved closer until they blended, no longer past, not yet future, only now. A love not reborn, but continued right where it had once been left behind. Seattle's nights have their own kind of light, the kind that whispers to the ones who've lost their way. You can still begin again, even after everything has fallen apart. Ethan's apartment sat on the 8th floor of an old building overlooking Lake Union. White walls, a rough wooden table, a few small plants growing in soil he'd brought from the Riverside site. Nothing luxurious but warm, because everything inside was built by his own hands. That night, after the conference, Ava came. No call, no warning, just a short message. I'm driving by the lake. Are you still awake? He opened the door. Ava stood there, long coat, hair damp with rain. Ethan smiled. This time you're not hiding in your car. This time I don't have to. He stepped aside. Come in. He just made tea. She entered. No glass chandeliers, no towering office skyline, only the scent of ginger, of tea, of something real. Ava took off her coat. And Saturday? You live here? Yeah. It's quiet. High enough to see the sky. Low enough to hear people. Silence. 2 cups of tea steamed gently on the table. I thought you'd go back to the corporate world, she said. Or start your own company. I thought so too, he replied. But not everyone's meant to stand on a stage. Some of us are built to walk the sidelines, to rebuild what others break. Ava smiled. You sound old. Maybe I've lived a few lifetimes in just 4 years. She looked at him for a while. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For what? For hurting you. He shook his head. You did what you had to. And thank you for doing it. She laughed softly. You really have changed. No, I've just learned how to forgive you. And myself. They stepped out to the balcony. Cool mist brushed their faces. The city lights reflected in the lake below like a second sky. I missed this, Ava said. Seattle still reigns the same, but it feels different. Maybe because we see it differently. It's not the rain that's changed, Ethan said. When you're at peace, the world softens too. She turned toward him, eyes deep and clear as a starlit night. Ethan, she whispered, do we still love each other? The question fell between them, not dramatic, just perfectly timed. Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked at the lights, then back at her. I don't know if it's still or again, he said slowly. I just know that when you're here, I feel home. Ava nodded gently. No tears, no urgency. Just 2 people standing side by side, hands almost touching, close enough to feel the warmth. We've come full circle, she said softly. No, he smiled. We've gone far enough to know where we belong. Midnight. The tea had gone cold. Ava rested her head on his shoulder. Words weren't needed. The rain outside kept its rhythm steady, patient, endless. Ethan spoke quietly. I used to think happiness meant having someone to love. Now I think it's being calm enough to love without fearing loss. Ava smiled, eyes half closed. I used to think strength meant needing no one. Now I know strength is daring to need someone without shame. They sat like that for a long while. The city below didn't sleep. In that small 8th-floor room, nothing sparkled, except something accurate and straightforward. 2 people who had once broken each other, now sitting together in peace. Ava lifted her head. Tomorrow I have to fly to New York for meetings. But I'll come back. Ethan nodded. I won't keep you, or see you off, but this door will always be open. And, she smiled, you've learned to say the kind of sentences that stay in people's minds. She stood, ready to leave. Ava, he called softly. She turned. He took her hand and said only one thing. Thank you for making me lose everything so I could learn who I am. Her eyes shimmered in the light rain. No, she whispered. Thank you for becoming yourself so I could find my way back. The door closed gently. Ethan walked back to the balcony, watching the rain. It no longer felt cold, it felt like breath, part of life itself. On the table, a small note Ava had left fluttered open. If you still drink coffee at Maple Street every Friday morning, maybe we'll happen to meet again. Ethan smiled, folded the note, and slipped it into his old journal, the one that began with the line, I used to think success was looking up. Now I think it's being able to look down without shame. He closed the book, placed it on the table. The lamp's warm glow caught the faint title engraved on the worn leather cover, Rebuilding Together. A few mornings later, the bell at Maple Street Cafe chimed. Ethan sat by the window, a hot cup of black coffee in hand. Outside, soft rain drifted down. The door opened. Ava walked in, smiling. No words. He stood, pulled out a chair. She, Saturday. Between them, silence. But it was the warm kind, the kind between 2 people with nothing left to hide. The world outside stayed noisy. But in that little corner of the cafe, there were 2 cups of coffee and 2 hearts that had finally learned peace. Thank you for listening. Some stories don't need grand endings, only quiet ones. Like Ava and Ethan, two souls who hurt each other, yet grew enough to sit together under the rain, saying nothing, just understanding. If this story touched you, leave a comment, a few words, or simply an emoji tie, just to say you still believe in love, even after it's been broken. Subscribe for the epilogue where Ava and Ethan turn pain into kindness, founding the Riverside Foundation, a place for those once misunderstood to begin again. Thank you for spending this time. This is Stories of America by Thor, where every story isn't just told to be heard, but to be felt, remembered, and loved one more time.